Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Buddhist Biohacker. It's Friday, and it has been a very interesting week, technically for me. So I do want to let everybody know that the movie release is still occurring, but we're having some technical issues, and it seems to be the story of my life this week. So anyways, we made it here, and we made it live, which is great. For everybody who's joining us for the first time, the Buddhist Biohacker is creating conscious content for 1111D. We take a stand against violence. We ask for compassion in all of your words and your actions. And it has been just an awesome, awesome week of shows. And I've looked forward to this for like a month now, I feel like. So I would really like to welcome our special guest today, Vedic astrologer Gilbert Picinich. Welcome, Gilbert.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be with you, Lisa. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here. And for everybody who's out there tuning in, Gilbert is a Vedic astrologer, and I had the privilege of having my chart read by him a month ago, as well as my husband, and it was so fabulous. I just loved it so much. So I was really excited to have you on. And I think it's a really cool topic because I think not everybody knows the difference between Vedic astrology and other kinds of astrology. But before we dive into that, Gilbert, you want to share a little bit about who you are and what you do when it comes to Vedic astrology and what it's all about, so we can just dive in.
Well, I've been a seeker for a long time, and I've had incredible teachers here and there, and on both visible and invisible. And I was always interested in astrology. I'd studied a lot of psychology, and I was very much interested in astrology. And around 2000, I began to do Vedic because I felt that there were sometimes pieces missing in Western. I just wasn't getting the certain, I guess, blind spots, certain things. And so I started doing Vedic. Since about 2000, I've been doing Vedic readings one-on-one, and I've had shamanic teachers that I've worked with, and I've found that as I cleared up things within blocks within me, that my intuition would increase, and my astrology would get my readings would become more insightful and more profound. And so I've been on this path for a while. Yeah.
That's awesome. So when you say, I want to talk about what Vedic astrology really is, if there's even a good way to define it, I guess. But part of what you just said is that there were some pieces missing in what you were looking at before. So I'd love to go into that a little bit more.
Well, Vedic astrology is based on what they call the Sidereal Zodiac, which means that it's actually where the planets are in space with respect to the background circle of the astrological signs. So it's not based on the seasons that we undergo in the Earth. So Western is called the Tropical Zodiac, which means that regardless of where the planets are with respect to the background, on the first day of spring in the northern hemisphere, that's always the first day of Aries, and that doesn't take into account a slight motion of the Earth, which is called the precession of the equinox, which is, if you can imagine a top coming to the end of its spin when its axis of revolution is spinning round and round, ready to fall. Well, the Earth has that axis wobble of revolution, and it takes about 25,000 years for it to go to complete one motion. So the Earth has three motions: the revolution around its axis, 1 day; the revolution around the sun, 1 year; and then this third motion, which is this precession of the equinox motion, which is the wobble of the axis itself. And so that changes where where Aries actually begins. So
Mhm.
2,000 years ago, around it, approximately, it began around the first day of spring in the northern hemisphere. And now, because of this wobble, it's back into Pisces. So we're in the age of Pisces. So the first day of spring is in Pisces now. It's not been in Aries for a long time. And so that wobble is what they call, when we'll be in the age of Aquarius, which is about probably around 300 to 400 years from now. And so that's one big difference, I think. And what that does is, if you look at the rising signs, which has to do with our body, our personality, our outlook into life, our how we project this particular incarnation into this life, that really changes, because somebody might have, in Western, they might have Scorpio rising, but in Vedic they'll have Libra rising. And so the difference is, a Martian, the sun, Mars rules Scorpio, so that makes that person very much more like a warrior, a spiritual warrior or any kind of warrior. And whereas Venus is more about art, about aesthetics, about balancing people, about pleasure seeking, about creating a beautiful environment. So there's a big difference. Also, the physicality. So that's what I began to notice. As I began to notice this, that's really one of the things that got me into looking into Vedic and studying Vedic astrology. The other thing is that in Vedic astrology, there are these planetary cycles that are very indicative of what we're going through on every level. It's almost as if we come onto the stage of life, and there are all these different actors and stage settings that we need to work through, whatever that is, work, relationships, everything, all about life. But what I found was that these planetary cycles infuse our experiences and change our experiences. Those planetary cycles shift. They go, let's say, from Saturn to Mercury. There's a big shift in the person, in the individual's life. And I found that to be really the most incredibly powerful thing. And I think that was really what really got me. And that began to fill in some of those pieces that I was missing. And that's not to say that Western astrology can't be 100% accurate, because ultimately it's also about the astrologer and how and their intuition. And of course, a lot of people have incredible intuition, don't even need astrology, they don't even need to look at anything, you're just tuned into the person. And so, of course, there's always an interchange between the astrology and the intuitive faculties, the psychic faculties, and all and that. And just one thing also, I'd just like to say that ultimately, we know, we all know the truth within ourselves. Astrology is a wonderful, elegant, beautiful tool to get to know ourselves and to get to understand our relationship here, and what our lessons are, what we're doing. But ultimately, an astrologer, no matter who he is, he can give you a guidance, but it's to look within yourself ultimately, and to find out how it fits for you.
Man, this is interesting. So I have a few questions. So did you start with Western astrology?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did. I started with Western, but the person who taught me the fundamentals was also doing Vedic, and he was kind of combining the two and using one and the other, and yeah. But it was mostly Western. I got I was looking at Western. It was so much easier to access Western books and Western knowledge at that time when I started. So that's what I did.
Interesting. And then the intuitive piece I want to talk about, because I had one Vedic astrology reading about 4 years ago, and it was the first reading I'd had for Vedic astrology, and I didn't really connect with it, to be honest. Didn't really feel like that person was really looking at me. And my chart reading with you was completely different. I felt like you absolutely understood who I was. I felt like what you pointed out in the chart is exactly where I'm at and what I need to work on. And I went back to that old recording to that other person, and this is totally, I'm not going to name names, this totally isn't to pick on, but the point is this intuitive piece, because when I listened to the old recording and then I listened to my recording with you, it was completely different. And a lot of it, I think, had to do with the intuitive piece and your ability to connect with me. And so I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit more. Like, what, for you, what's your process to bring that intuitive piece into the readings? Like, how does that work for you?
I think, well, I've been seeking, I've been looking for the truth for a long time, and that led me to a few teachers, a few shamans, and then it led me to a yogi master that initiated me into a meditation. And so I've been working on myself, and I've been working on the shadow and this and that for a long time, for quite a few years since, that was 96 when I met that. But before that, I started in 82, 83 to really like wonder what's going on here. And it wasn't a steady, absolute PhD course. I was experiencing life and going into this and that, but I always had this idea what's going on, and that began early in my childhood. And so through that, I think that I've gained, through these wonderful teachers, I've gained a clearer mental being. I've received a lot of grace, and I've been able to fortunately, it's cleared up things. So it's opened up. It's so my intuition has gotten better. So I employ it. Before I do a reading, I'll prepare and I'll ask for clarity and guidance, and so I know that there are helpers, help happening. So I think that it all comes together like that. And certainly things like Reiki that I've done for a while, and shamanic energy healing, I remember that really also cleared up a lot, and also tuned me into the energetic being that we are as well. So I think that's what helps. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you can definitely tell just from my own experience. And I'm curious, so what has Vedic astrology done for you ultimately? Like, what do you feel today in the present moment has been the gift or the biggest change or transformation that you've seen from working with the Vedic astrology?
It helped me to look at the world in a more detached way, and the events in a more detached way, especially when I was a lot more attached, as I began to look at astrology and see that certain events do actually happen under certain astrological configurations, let's say. I began to see that there's a certain order that is in to a certain extent destined, and to a certain extent we need to act also within that. But even some of the internal, I noticed even some of the internal thinking and the internal things that are going on can many times be shown by astrological aspects. Like, for instance, the most popular one is Mercury Retrograde, and now a lot of people know about that, and they notice that things don't work, communications fail, or there are technological glitches and things like that really tend to come up, or things that so things come up like that. So I think that's a very valuable thing that's occurred with my journey through astrology. And I've never stopped really learning. I've always really loved it. I never thought it would turn into doing it as work, And then when I got injured with my job, I went to a healer, and he just said, "Oh, you should be doing astrology. You should be doing astrology." He just gave me his clients, and he said, "Get a reading from him." And then that began my astrology work. That was very generous of him.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What's like people when they think of astrology, they think, oh, what's your sign, right? And it's so much more complicated than that, I feel. But what's the difference between, like, is the sun sign the same in Vedic astrology versus Western astrology? Is it different? Is it called something different? Like, what's the difference there?
Well, in Vedic astrology, the rising sign is the most important, and the ruler of the rising sign is like your planet, your important planet to be. So if you're, let's say, Gemini rising, Mercury is your planet, and you can follow Mercury around. And especially when it goes retrograde, you probably noticed it. Of course, it goes retrograde 3 times a year. So if you're 30 years old, that's 90 times already within your life. And Vedic also looks at the moon, and it's very strong. In fact, all the cycles are based on the moon. So I think it comes down to because it's considered, the creation is considered the feminine. Shakti is the feminine creative force. So the moon really determines everything, and the sun is also. So it's the three things. It's the sun, the moon, and the rising sign. But all the cycles are based on the moon. And having been in a Western astrologer, I see how the moon is so determining of a person's psychological. Especially the psychological part, and it's the moon that brings in whatever dramas we need to move on. So the moon is very, very important. It's also the mind. It's also to a certain extent, it's not so much the intellect, which is Mercury, but it is the awareness within which the intellect can operate. The moon is the expanded awareness within. So that's the moon, the sun, and the rising sign are really what Vedic astrology looks at. But of course, when you're born, the specific configurations of the planets and where they are all in relationship to each other is what determines your energetic being, and also it's what to unfold, and it's what is to unfold in this life. So yeah,
that's interesting. So if I'm a Scorpio sun sign in Western astrology, is it the same, or is it different because of the 25,000 year wobble that you were talking about?
So right now, if you're born sometime between, let's say, 1930 and now, you're basically about 24 degrees. It's basically about 24 degrees back. So if you have a Western chart and you subtract 23 degrees from each planet, each sign, then that will show you exactly where the planet was in reality when you were born. This is one of the big issues that astronomers have with astrology, among other things, that the actual planets actually do anything. But among other things, they say, well, how could it be? We're 23 degrees off anyway. So I mean, what are you astrologers looking at? But actually, in Sidereal Zodiac, which even Western astrology sometimes uses it, but in Sidereal Zodiac, most of it is tropical. In Sidereal, then depending on what so let's say if you're 23 degrees Scorpio and you subtract 23, you'd go back into Libra. So you'd be 29 degrees Libra around around there. And so it all depends. It depends, but it's not, each sign has 30 degrees, and 30 times 12 is 360. So that's a complete circle. And so that's how you break it up.
Interesting. This is making me want to go listen to the chart again. I'm like, oh no, now I got to remember what I was.
Well, what day were you?
November 21st, 78.
November 21st. So that would be almost the beginning of Sag in Western. But then you're November 21st. Yeah, you're definitely your sun is definitely in Scorpio. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think your rising sign was in Gemini. So you see, Gemini. I mean, what a beautiful expression of Gemini you're doing. because look what you've created, this forum and the whole, I mean, you've given a platform for, that's a very high, and so of course, all the planets have the potential to be used as a shadow and has light, and so depending on where we are and how much and that's all the work we do within, we transform these planets into the expression of light, and ultimately we're not really, I mean, we free ourselves up from all these forces ultimately, because we are free ultimately from all these forces, really.
Yep, which is the best part. I mean, I think it's cool, and part of what I appreciated about when we talked about this in my chart reading is that there is this expression of the planet, and it can look different depending on where you're at in your life and how you're expressing it at that time. And I think that gives a lot of power back to us as individuals to continue to co-create, which is the whole point, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm so sorry. I'm all stuffed up. My whole family is sick, so geez. But Laura has a question. Laura Hill, she says, "Thank you, Lisa, for interviewing Gilbert. Questions for Gilbert. Would you say our natal charts are like karmic paths? And how are we attributed a natal chart to begin with? And how does it get designed for us?" That's a whole lot of... So maybe we start with just, would you say our natal charts are like karmic paths? That's a great question.
I would say the natal chart is definitely a reflection of our karmic, of what we need, of many of the karmic situations that we need to go through, whether it's paying back some karma or, the whole karmic thing. It's a reflection. How it's set up is, I mean, there's some karma lord that say, I guess that I heard that they discuss with you what you need to do and what you need to learn and what you need, and then there's a perfect moment within which you're launched onto this plane, and then the unfoldment of that, and of course we forget some, that other fun. We forget the other side, and then we go through it and we unfold here, and the chart does reveal that unfoldment. It's something that is not independent of us, let's say. It's not something that is we're not a victim of our chart. I mean, ultimately, so there are two ways to look at. There are always two ways of looking at this too. There's the dualistic and the non-dualistic way. The dualistic way would say that the planets are affecting us, and therefore we're moving here, we're moving there, and to a certain, and that's true, and as well as the non-dualistic way, which would say everything is happening simultaneously, and the planets are symbols of what is going on as well, and they symbolically mirror or symbolically indicate also what is happening. So and I find myself in different moods or states sometimes where I'm either one way, I could be one way or the other on that, on this path. So
yeah, that's interesting. Even as you're saying that, I can relate with both sides, but I definitely think the non-dualistic side is probably more what I relate with. But interesting because this just makes me have so many questions for you, but can you see the unfoldment when you look at someone's chart? Like, can you see at what point in their life they're going to go through like these different changes? Are those all there laid out? Like the opportunities to clear the karma, but also opportunities to kind of ascend or to self-realize? Like, can you see that in everyone's charts?
If Lisa, I didn't. There was a little bit of crackling. Are you saying can I actually see the? Can I see the certain events or?
Yeah, can you see the events where you can self-realize or clear that karma? Like, can you see that all laid out across?
I definitely see specific things that can happen when there's a lot of confluence of factors indicating that, okay, this person now is going to go through some major relationship test, relationship learning, relationship lesson. That's absolutely there all the time, and they're clearing up, and they're, and through that they clear up something, or specifically, I mean, this is an interesting, specifically when Saturn is on the moon, that Saturn is close to the moon, it's specifically called Sade Sate, which is a 7.5-year thing. And that is absolutely indicative of somebody, especially if they're on the path. If they're not on the path, it can get, and by path I mean any contemplative, any search for wanting to get to the truth of who you are, who the world is, who your friends are, who, and also the welling up of greater love within and all that. So as long as that will definitely always work. That definitely clears up stuff, and regardless, and having a little bit of a, I've noticed with people I've worked with that have that having a little bit of a, of a heads up on that aspect really helps along the way, because it's rather rigorous. I mean, we come here and we see life, and then, a lot of times we forget about the fact that we are here for a certain reason, to find out who we really are, and all that, and it begins to be part of other things, other whatever it is. We easily get attached. I mean, this place is fun, it's like there's a lot of amusements and diversions and everything. And Saturn comes in on the moon and says, okay, start doing your job, start doing what your dharma of finding out. And so, yeah, so there are certain aspects like that are so, like, they never fail. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen somebody not have to go through something during that time, that would indicate that they're gaining some ground with that.
Is that like the Saturn, like you're talking about, is the Saturn return, like they say, like your Saturn return is like, 30 and 60 years, is it different than that?
It's different. If you were born with Saturn on the moon, then yeah, then it would happen. But it really has to do with Saturn coming back to the moon, and it does happen every 30 years. Yeah, okay. It does happen every 29 years. So it is that, but it's also the sign before the moon, the sign of the moon, and the sign after the moon. So that's altogether 7.5 years, because Saturn takes 2.5 years to go through each sign. So the first part is kind of like a setup. The stage is being set. You're being moved to a new place. Like there's a wonderful story in Vedic mythology about the king. And it's specifically about this aspect. It's about a king that goes to a fair and wants to buy a beautiful horse, and he tries all these horses, and finally there's this kind of magician type person, and he's got this incredible horse, and the king said, may I try it? And the horse takes him to this, just takes away, his guards can't catch him, and he suddenly finds himself in a new kingdom where he's nobody, has nothing, nobody knows he's a king. And so through that time he suffers, because hey, he was a king before, he was living as a king, and he had all the power and all the everything, and he was good, benevolent. But through being in this place where nobody knows him, he has to go back inside and re-establish his connection to the source of his being, to the self. And so that that process unfolds through that. And then eventually, he makes his way back, but not before he goes through that. And that's pretty much how Saturn can be described, and how I've seen it. I mean, we don't go to fairs and ride horses, but we do go into other realms. And whether it's, it could be a psychological realm, it could be a lot of the emotion, it's a lot of different ways that this manifests, depending on the house it's in, depending on a lot of different things. And I've seen people's lives really change on a physical level as well, sometimes at that. So that definitely shows that a person is, to answer your question finally, I'm sorry if I'm making this too long, but yeah. That's it.
It's not too long at all. I mean, I love the explanation. And so truly, when people talk about a Saturn return, it doesn't have to be when you're 30 and 60. It's every 30 years, sort of, depending on your sign and where your moon's at and all of these things. So it could be different for everybody, right?
Okay, so a Saturn return does not have to do with the moon. That has to do with you're born 30 years later, Saturn is back to where it was. 30 years after that, it's back again to where it was. It goes all around. But where the moon thing has to be, Saturn can be, when you're born, the moon can be in any relationship, any distance away from where Saturn is. So it could be the opposite, which would then take 15 years to get to. So a person might go through that Saturn aspect when they're 15. The first time, and then it'll happen again 30 years after that, and then 30 years after that, and then so it still follows that 30-year cycle. Saturn takes exactly 29 and a half years to go around the zodiac, so it still follows that cycle. But Saturn return means Saturn goes back to its own place, and Sadisate means that Saturn comes to the moon. It's actually Sadisate in Sanskrit is translated as 7.5 because it's about altogether it's 7.5, but the real intensity is about 2.5 years. Yeah, so that it is different. Yeah, it is a different aspect.
Oh my God, thank God for the explanation.
Yeah, sure.
This makes me, I'm gonna have to call you and have another reading so I can ask when those things are, because I think it's interesting being Scorpio. I like to know when there's those rough spots, you can like really dig in and do your work. Because I think if you can dig in and get it over with, you're not going to have it be as tough the next time. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's always like that. It's if you've done the work, then as long as you keep up with the work, because Saturn is like it's like it can be quite a taskmaster. So, but as long as you do the work, it's still work, but you've done it, and it's not like you got to catch up. It's it's the same as school. I mean, it's pretty much like that. Yeah, and if you've done that inner work, then it's actually be very, very it could be very it's very reward. It could be very rewarding. I mean, I know that John Lennon of the Beatles was going through it just as the Beatles were getting huge, just as they hit the top, and there were times when you could tell that he wrote the song Help, and so he was feeling like, what is going on? I'm in this other realm. But at the same time, his life was exploding, and he was, his influence was global, so there, it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily constrictive, because Saturn could be constrictive, and it can be, whereas Jupiter is its opposite. It's expansive. So Saturn would sooner make you, make you go in the corner and work on this particular thing here until you're done working with that, and that's when you'll be able to leave, kind of thing. So if we do the work, then it's not, then it's a much smoother ride for sure.
Oh, I love it. So I know that you put together some stuff for us about what's upcoming, and I think we're all excited about that and excited to hear kind of what your insights are about the current astrology. So what do you want to share? Like, what do you feel like sharing first?
Well, I'd like to share things about the Pluto and Saturn conjunction, which means that in the sky, they're in the same place. They're close together. They've been close together. Now they've been in Capricorn. They joined in Capricorn. So I'd like to do a little history just to get an idea of what this conjunction does and how it affects the world in a big way. And then I can get more into an individual thing. So in around 1788 and 1789, the U.S. Constitution was ratified. So we declared our freedom from Britain, and also the French Revolution began. So that was the last time that Saturn and Pluto were together in Capricorn. In October of around 2014 and 15, they were together in Gemini. That was the beginning of World War I. In 1947, they were together in Capricorn. And the cardinal signs tend to be more powerful too. So the cardinal signs are Capricorn, Cancer, Libra, and Aries. So in 1947, when it was in Capricorn, when it was in Cancer, it was India declared its independence from the British Empire. The European boundaries were redrawn. UN split up Palestine. The IMF was started. The end of World War II. So it's kind of like big events, and they hearken to the theme of sovereignty and gaining independence and freedom, And so in 82, it was in Libra. They met in Libra, and there was a big banking crisis here. There was a recession, an SNL bailout, and things like that. But also the Soviet-Afghan War was started around that time, and it was going on. And that wouldn't be such a big thing, but it's that Soviet-Afghan War that precipitated the end of the USSR. According to scholars, that was one of the major factors that started to end one of the biggest events, which was the end of this big USSR. So that was a huge event. So now Saturn is back where it was, and in this place. And what's interesting about it is that around March, April, January, and December, and Saturn was in a specific place called Uttarashada in Vedic, which is called a situation is set up for resting. Which I couldn't believe it when I saw that, but I mean, we certainly got enough rest. Pretty much anyway. So now it's back there, and the question is, I see it as well. We see what's going on in the world, and with especially in the United States. I think that a lot of it, there's a big polarization happening between people who want to get to the truth but people who don't maybe care so much. There's a possibility for there's certainly a potential for a new establishment of creating a new way of being. I mean, and I think that on a big scale, even beyond astrology, is what is being asked of humanity to reassess our relationship with the Mother Earth and each other, and how this is going to go on, and so there's of course a lot of potential for that.
Gilbert, this is interesting because you're mentioning India's independence, and I had a lucid dream with Gandhi in May.
Oh,
that
wow.
was so powerful. I mean, it's still unfolding, I feel. It was a really, really potent lucid dream. And
interesting.
And in the dream, he initiated me. At the end of the dream, his thumb to my third eye and pushed me back, and I slammed back into my body, and I woke up. This is, in fact, why Buddhist Biohacker has a stand against nonviolence. It came through that dream. And I didn't know anything about Gandhi, really. And so I watched the movie, which was really, the movie was good. It was all right. But it's hard to watch any Hollywood movies right now, I feel. But
yeah.
And just learned the story. And so this is really interesting to me that you're saying that that's part of the astrology right now. And you came in a dream. I don't know what that means really, but I just wanted to share that because I thought that's really affirming to hear what you're saying about these. I knew there were United States events and the Constitution and different astrological things with that, but I did not know about the India's independence. So it's interesting, peculiar.
Yeah, and nonviolence certainly is an important thing, and especially in Capricorn too. what's happening is Capricorn, because because this conjunction happened in Capricorn. Capricorn on an individual level, Capricorn engages the individual to universalize. So certainly through this past 5-6 months, we've been like, okay, what's going on? It can't only be about just getting this career going, just da da da. I think these events have created a lot of questioning about really who we are, how we're going to move forward, who we are as individual, who we are as a community, who we are as spiritual beings, and I see that. I mean, there's a certain sovereignty, a sacred sovereignty that is wanting to be established. That so that we can move on beyond our whatever colors, races, religions. There's a greater unification among us, and the potential for that is there. It's very strongly indicative of where Saturn will be over the next year, specifically because it's a tiny portion of the zodiac that's called Abhijit, and it's ruled by Krishna. And so it is about a higher level of unity. It is about love, a higher level of unity, and that's the potential that we have. So all of us, that's it. That's what we can vibrate to that and have that.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
What so how do we make the most of the astrology right now? How do we, when you say, okay, it's set up for this sacred sovereignty, which I love that terminology, what can we do as a collective to kind of take that to the highest potential?
As a collective, I think that this is what you've done is fantastic to get people to talk, because this definitely opens up the communications between people who are interested about talking about this stuff and moving forward, and knowing that there's a greater greater landscape that within which we can exist here, psychologically, spiritually, physically. So it's about communicating, and also then bringing it in. It's important to bring it into practice, and certainly with Pluto and Saturn together in Capricorn, it's making it real. It's about making it real now. So, and there are other indications of that as well, with Uranus and Mars and Aries, and over the next January, February, March 2001, there'll be a Uranus-Mars conjunction. So that'll be about taking that initiative and making it real, and as whatever that is, whatever pings we get in our consciousness to move forward towards expansion, towards greater community, towards love, to really bring it in and make it real somehow. That's what it's saying astrologically.
I like that. So it's really activating, taking action on these prompts that you're getting spiritually, and even through truth information, taking action on those prompts. What do you see? So I know when we talked clairvoyantly, I've seen that there is definitely some kind of quarantine or something going on in September. And what I had seen was about the 9th to the 15th clairvoyantly. And you had mentioned that those dates did have some energy around them. And I'm just curious, what do you see coming up for us as we go into this final part of this 2020 year?
Well, there is a lot of the quarantine is definitely there. There's one. Yeah, that's an interesting question. There is. I mean, here I'm in New York, and it's very I would call it, in my opinion, draconian. Some of the things that are, how strongly certain things are enforced. But I mean, it is definitely it is. But what is that wants us to be isolated? There's a lot of fear, unfortunately. That's what must be mastered. That's what has to be released. Call it fear, and by mastering, I mean call it what it is, and then you're free from it. Otherwise, you're acting with it. So there's a lot of fear. Now, normally with Saturn transits and Pluto, there is fear. So, but this is to free us up of the fear. Think of it as freeing it up. We don't have to act on it. It's about fearing. Now, I do meditation and other spiritual practices to maintain, that it's mostly about what's going on in I watch my mind as much as I can throughout the whole day, no matter what I'm doing. So it is about calling it out, calling these things out, so that, because we don't want to, because fear in a way is a quarantine. It's an inner quarantine. It keeps us in a state of isolation. And so I believe that, change, it's about changing the mind, and then the outer will just, that's what will happen in the outer. That's because it starts here.
I love it.
So there could be events. There could be more events that give us the opportunity to give over our fears. Yes.
Yeah.
Because we still need to go through it. It's still as a group, but also there are many people who are recognizing this. But really, the fear is it's really, really suffocating. And we need to that I think that's a very important trait to recognize. And what are we fearful of? Think about it. What is it that creates this fear? Is it fear of death, fear of injury, fear of whatever it is? It's important to go in there and look, and then to ask, who am I, and to contemplate. And my path is to meditate, to contemplate, to look within, to see what's going on inside. It's very important to create an inner life. And I think that's what our isolation, the quarantine that we've had, and we might have further, is about that, to help to gives us an opportunity to create an inner life, so that when we go back on this stage, we're a new enhanced actor, a more connected actor to the director, let's say, to the source of our being.
Yeah. I love it, and I agree. And I think, just like you're saying, refining your spiritual practices, meditation, contemplation, inquiry, journaling, all of those things are what can help you with that, for sure. Yeah. What else do you want to share about what's upcoming? Any other key points you wanted to share?
Yeah, one thing about the United States map chart is that for a while now, Neptune has been very close to the United States moon. And so Neptune, the dark side of Neptune is escapism through whatever, drugs, computers, alcohol, all those things. And the upside of Neptune is higher, expanded states of consciousness, different states of consciousness, different states of awareness. It's meditation. It's also about aesthetics. It's about graphic art, the aesthetic of graphic art, paintings, movies, things like that. So as Neptune,
this is my Neptune gong right behind me.
What was that? Yeah.
This is my Neptune gong right here.
Great. Great. Yeah. So that's so as Neptune moves, it moves. It's gonna, and it'll take till 2022 actually, but it's coming to the end. And so there's going to be, and there's other indications that we're going into a time of sobriety, so to speak, a little more sobriety, so that we're not, and by that I mean, so there's not, a lot of people are going to go into like reducing the distractions and going and again, so that they can listen to their intuition, listen to their inner self, and that's the opportunity that's coming up. So that's yeah, that's another thing. I mean, respect to events, I would say the January, February, March of December 2020, February, March. There could be, there could be some outer events. I mean, right here on the East Coast now, there's been the 3 hurricanes. I mean, there's been a hurricane a week and a half ago. There's another hurricane coming up. With hurricane, and California is, on fire. I mean, there's fires everywhere. So that's a lot of fire energy. Now, Uranus and Mars just went into Uranus. So Mars and Uranus are in the same sign, and Aries is fire. It's fire. It's a fire sign. It's the first sign. So as Mars went near Uranus, all these fires in California began. But Uranus will now recede back into Pisces, which it's like Mercury retrograde. It'll go back into Pisces, and then it'll have to go back into then it'll go speed up and go back and touch Uranus. So there are going to be things with fire. There are going to be conflagrations throughout the world. I mean, there's going to be fights. There's going to be there's anger. Mars is anger, so anger will have to be expressed. And that's another. These things like fear, anger, jealousy. That's Mars. Those are all definitely jealousy and anger are Martian. So those are things to check out, because those things can block who we are, can block the awareness of who we are. Because when one is in a state of anger, unless it's being directed into something positive, it could definitely block our perception, block our actions, can result in consequences we don't want to deal with later. And so that's the thing. That would be the thing to look at on an inner level, is to look at jealousy. See, am I acting out of jealousy? Is this happening? Is this happening out of anger? Is this happening? Has this thought been created out of the source of anger, out of the source of jealousy, out of the source? So you look at those things, and then as you become aware of it, then it's no longer has any power over you, because now you're aware of it. Now you know. Now you can step back. Now you've just given greater power to yourself, to your inner self. So being that Mars will be so active, those I would say that would be really helpful. That gives us the opportunity to overcome those and move forward with those particular little things there.
Yeah. So what is the light? So if the shadow side of like Mars is the fire and the anger kind of energy, what's the higher consciousness of Mars?
The higher consciousness of Mars is the spiritual warrior. It's the one that is in the moment and deals with the truth and states the truth and stands in truth. It's the spiritual warrior, par excellence.
I love that. And it's interesting, the Neptune piece, my husband and I bought this gong a couple years ago now, and it's the first one that we've gotten, and we listened to a lot of planets, and we knew we wanted Neptune. And here it is, this is what it's all about right now. And it just, every time I turn around, there's somebody talking about Neptune. So I love that you're talking about it today. Here it is again.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, that is interesting. It's also, Neptune also rules musicianship, music. Music, they say that Neptune, Edgar Cayce said that Neptune will give Tchaikovsky or Beethoven a symphony in 5 seconds, and then he's got to work it out to write it down. So Neptune inspires art, inspires that, and it gives us that flash. I mean, I remember when I started playing guitar again, before I started playing again, I was going through a hard time, and I had these beautiful dreams of the most beautiful music I'd ever heard, beyond anything that I've ever heard in this world. And I remember being in a dream and saying, I should stop this and go hum it into a recorder. But there's no way this is going to happen. But it was a very strong, and Neptune was very much close to my chart, very, very close to my Venus actually at the time, and so it was bringing music, and that's when I started to play again and started to write music for the first time, and started to and that was also when I was doing a lot of creative other stuff, artisan kind of stuff with other things. So Neptune will bring that kind of energy in, and of course we're not limited to when these planets do these things. We from our own sovereign spiritual self can bring these things forward. These forces are within us. It's just the planets do kind of ease us into things and give us these experiences, also. I mean, it's not, I don't want to sound like we're ruled by the planets, because it's not true at all.
I love it. Talking about Neptune and what you were saying before too, it can be that escapism, or it can be the higher consciousness, and it really, that, like, I just want to put an exclamation point on that, and what you said for everyone, because I think that is the risk we run right now, is can we get caught up in the spiritual bypassing of this time of ascension and 5D and all these things we want to talk about, or are we going to do that real work to get to the higher consciousness and work with the shadow and fear and all the things you're talking about? Because I think it's really easy to ride a bliss wave, and it's not as easy to do the work, but the work is what creates a sustainable bliss wave. It's like once you do the work, you're at the higher level. So it really out to me what you're saying, because essentially what you're saying is really till 2022 we're still in this space of looking at, am I bypassing things, am I trying to stay in this meditative blissful space, or am I taking advantage of this time and looking at the Mars energy, the anger and the fear and the jealousy and the fire and all this heavy stuff, and really transmuting that into light? It just really, like, I see that, like, with what you're talking about, it's so important for all of us to understand, like, there's a way to hide from it all and escape it, or there's a way to just face it and get through it. And it's part of that split reality we're experiencing right now. Some folks are bypassing all of this truth, and some folks are digging into it. So you got to decide where you want to be, on what side of that Neptune coin.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. It's exactly a perfect example. Is I know people who've gone to Peru and done 28 ayahuasca weekends, and still, but if you don't make it real, if you don't bring it into the real, if you don't, it has to be worked on. Especially the shadow, the shadow is definitely an important thing, and it does come up astrologically, like with me, even having been an astrologer, I didn't realize I have Leo rising, and my sun is very strong. So Leo, the sun is ruled by Leo. So that's pride, right? That the bottom side of that, the shadow of Leo rising and the sun is pride, egoism, pride. So I never saw it. It took me a long time of doing this work, and I think it takes time to prepare to be able to deal with the shadow as well. And when you're there, it's ready. And then as I started to, and I had help. I had great teachers. It's like, again, I'll say, I have to say that because it's true. It's absolutely true. As I began to peel away the layers of pride, I began to have experiences from way back, like when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and they were coming at me like for months. They were coming at me like showing me how within the filter of pride, or within that, I had behaved in certain ways that was really constricting and very it didn't give me the opportunity to express fully who I am, but I went along the pride path, and so, and it wasn't, of course it wasn't constant through all those years, but it's just one of those things that as I became aware of it, and then started to contemplate and examine my thoughts as they were happening, it dropped. Now, as an astrologer, I would say, that was obvious, but for some reason, I needed to establish a stronger. The pride was actually also a protection, because I needed to establish a stronger awareness of my inner self and a stronger identification with the self before I could start to release this outer shell that was keeping me also. So there is, so it works together. But it does, I felt like also, I would say that because I was on this, I chose this path, and because I worked it, I think it probably happened a lot faster than it would have happened. I mean, to become aware of it, because I wanted to free I always want to become freer. So there's other things, and so you just move along. But that's one example of how astrology can help with that, but at least giving an indication of what some of the shadow points might be for this incarnation, and also how one can move forward from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got some great questions, Gilbert. I love all of you guys who are watching and participating. We've got a couple. I'll read them, and then Gilbert, you can take whichever one you want to do first. So, AKA Miss Mo. I love you guys' handles, by the way. Everybody has these awesome social media handles. Anyways, she says, Gilbert, have you heard that right now? Oh gosh, I don't know. You might have to look at this because it's a lot of astrological jargon. I don't know. It says when SA is in Capricorn.
I can't hear you.
Oh, that's my technology.
You're crackling off.
Comment. Look at Miss Mo's comment, because it's all astrological jargon. So I'm not going to know how to interpret it as well as you.
Oh, okay. It's somewhere here.
Yeah, it's up in the top corner. I'll read this question while you're figuring that out. Christine is asking, how do we use moon wisdom rather than sun wisdom? Is there a method to doing that? Is Christine's question.
Well, I would begin by looking at your moon sign and where your moon was when you were born, and then looking at the sign, because the signs are pretty much the same. I mean, there are some differences between Vedic and Western, but looking at the moon sign, and the moon calls to our right side of the brain, the feminine also. So it's important. I mean, I think that's in a general way that we have to bring more of the feminine in to our collective consciousness, so that the earth can be treated better and we all can treat each other better. But so it's really on an inner level. The moon is about intuition. It's about healing. It's about community. It's about nurturance. It's the mother. It's the mother energy, the moon. So to look for that energy within, and then manifest it and practice it. And then specifically, you could look at your moon sign and see, what color that would look like, what the painting is more like for you specifically. And then of course there's also, if you look at if there are any planets near your moon, your natal chart moon, then you bring that in. So a person that would have, let's say Mercury near the moon would be very much more about talking about their feelings and talking about things like that. Talking about the imagination, and also the trick to that would be not to fall into intellectualizing the feelings, or becoming too intellectual and just creating a separation between the feelings and the. So that's a few tips there. So I found the thread here. Which one?
It's Miss Mo. She's second to the last comment right now. She's talking about I think what she's asking is if Sagittarius is in Capricorn when it transits in Aries, is that more intense? I think that's what she's asking. But
have heard right now It's Bat.
I'm guessing that's not.
It's not so bad when Saturn in Capricorn, notwithstanding conjunction of Pluto. And how about when Saturn transits into Aries? What could be more? What could be more
Intense, she's saying.
That could be more intense, right? It's not bad. There's nothing bad. I mean, ultimately, we're getting together. We're working on ourselves, and we're moving forward. And regardless of what's going on the outside, I mean, it is. I mean, this has not been. I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's not necessarily going to continue being bad. It'll especially with this lockdown and the quarantine and all that. But we'll continue to be challenged somehow, and so when we meet, we have to meet these challenges. There is a part of ourselves that is the witness. So with Jupiter, conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto, of course, Jupiter helps a lot. And as Jupiter goes past Saturn, gets past Saturn and Pluto, because Jupiter travels a lot faster. During this time, Jupiter will give us the wisdom to understand what is in our highest best interest and what is in the highest best interest of everybody, if that's how we want to think. So we could get a lot of expansion through that. So that's why these next 4 or 5 months, 4 or 5 months, let's say, are going to be very powerful for stepping forward. It's an opportunity. These planets do not come together in these signs, not that often. I mean, last time was a couple of 100 years ago. So Saturn in Aries. It's not. You can look at one planet. It's not necessarily intense. I mean, Saturn in Aries happens to be very weak because it's debilitation. So, and that won't be for a while. Saturn won't be in Aries for 5 to 7 years. In 7 years, Saturn will be will start in Aries again. Now, I would recommend this book. Last time Saturn was in Aries, this book was recommended to me by a master, and it's called The Greatness of Saturn. It's a small book. It's got half of it is like kind of professorial and analytical, and the other half is the mythology of astrology, and each planet plays a role. So it's a very good book if you want to learn more about that, Miss Mo.
Oh, that's cool. I'll put that book in the show notes too for everybody. If you guys, that sounds very interesting. I have a book. Really funny story. I bought a book called Beneath a Vedic Sky that talks about Vedic astrology. And I got this book like years ago, and I never read it. Just had it. And when my husband and I met, he had that book too. And same thing, he bought that book and he never read it. So we have 2 versions of Beneath the Vedic Sky. So we both were like, okay, now's the time to read it, because we've definitely gotten to a place where we actually want to learn and create space for it. So it's pretty funny.
I have that book too.
You?
Yeah. I had it a long time. I've had it so long now. It's one of the books, I have like 100 probably, but yeah. No, it's good. It's definitely a good start. It's definitely a good book to get acquainted with the Vedic perspective. I mean, the Vedic perspective philosophically also, and maybe I left that out before, is also more. They're definitely a little more in tune to recognizing that we are a soul that incarnates to continue its evolution. So that's definitely more philosophically in Vedic than in Western. Although it also depends on the astrologer, always.
Yeah.
I mean, you could put Carl Jung used to talk about how well, they used to ask him, why do you think astrology? Because he thought astrology works, and he was a great mind. He was a genius. He actually was friends with Einstein, and they had conversation. Carl Jung was like, he was the Einstein of the humanities, basically. I mean, that's, so he was saying, well, he felt like it was like wine, if the wine is made in a certain field at a certain time in a certain season, the grapes, and the wine tastes a certain way, and that's how we are manifest. That's what we manifest. We're a manifestation of that specific time when we were born. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Yes, Christine, I will put the beneath the Vedic sky and the brightness of Saturn. And time flies in here, doesn't it, Gilbert? I mean, it just does. And I would love to give you some space to share with everybody what you offer and how they can connect with you. Obviously, Gilbert's information is in the show notes. It's coming across the screen right now. But I also love for you to give to have space to be able to share that and connect. I've had a reading with Gilbert, and it's awesome. So I highly recommend him for all of you guys who are interested in connecting with him. But Gilbert, if you want to just have some space to kind of share what you offer and how folks can connect with you.
Sure. I do a reading based on your astrological chart. I approach it as we're going on a journey together, and we're going to explore whatever themes you would like to explore, and I offer a perspective that has helped people to leverage some of the issues or problems they might have by having another perspective and being able to deal with it. I never say that it's the end all and the be all. The end all and the be all is always within you, and it's always important to remember that. But I do offer that's basically what I do. I mean, I also do astrocartography, which is moving to a place that is maybe a little more in alignment with who you are. And the caveat to that is, whatever lessons we come to learn them. It's just that it might be better to learn them, let's say, in a warm place than in the North Pole, let's say, energetically. But sometimes it has to be the North Pole. But so it is. There isn't like I could move there and then become the famous rich person I've always wanted to be. But it never works that way. So but there is quite an amazing. I've had quite an amazing feedback on some of that. So that's what I do. I mean, astrology is about also bringing out the latent qualities that could be further developed, nurtured, and it could tune into things about yourself that you may not have known that need to be is like a gift that you might have that needs to be watered a little bit to come to blossom. And also the trip ups, some of the possible things that block you along the way. So that's basically it. And also what's coming up, how the planetary cycles are changing, and the possible new landscapes upon which your experience here could change. Actual specific events on February 10th, this is going to happen. That is very unusual, although sometimes it does come out. Normally, when I do readings, I recognize too that I only get information that the other person is meant to know a lot of times. Like with some people, they get a lot, and some people, they're not meant to know certain things right now. So they might ask a question, but it won't come out, but enough to move forward, because it is about being in the moment here, and it is about being in the here and now, and being aware of the here and now is a great tool. It's a great way to be. So I get a lot of people too because I had health issues when I was much younger. I get a lot of people that have a lot of sixth house issues. And sometimes I see things that could help. I mean, I remember having one day I had a 30-year-old that came for a reading. No, one day I had like an older person. She was in her 50s, and she came for a reading, and she had all kinds of maladies. And then the next day, a 30-year-old came, and she was on the same path, which was a lot of abusive, using a lot of drugs and things like that. And the charts were almost exactly the same. They were very close. They're never exactly the same, but they were close enough that the themes were there. And I was, so she came at a time, and I gave her my feedback, and I gave her my, and so it's a way of, I would say it's all part of destiny, because it's all what we got to do. So even if you go to an astrologer, it's just part of the destiny to you to go there, and also the astrologer to tell you what he's going to tell you or she's going to tell you. But so I think that's about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I hope you guys reach out to Gilbert. And Gilbert, I really love having you on. I could really talk to you for quite a long time, it seems like. So
yeah, me too.
We're going to come back, and we're going to do this, and because it's been really an honor having you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. You're welcome, and thank you.
And thank you to our lovely audience. Thank you guys so much for participating and asking questions and connecting in. And hopefully my cold will be gone by the end of the weekend. And
you did great anyway.
Oh, geez. Well, I will be back on at 3 o'clock. We have one more guest this week, and her name is Jaitara Jade. She is a survivor of sex trafficking. So she's going to be sharing all about her journey, but she also has created an incredible program for sacred sexuality, and she's going to be sharing that today at 3 o'clock. So I'm really excited to have her on as well, and definitely worth tuning in, especially in this day and age and all the things that we're managing through as a collective community. So thank you so much, Gilbert. We'll see you again soon for sure.
Okay.
And thank you to everybody who's been listening, and everybody have an amazing, amazing day. And we'll be back at 3 o'clock.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.